Nektarios Liolios, he doesn't need any genuine introductions. Anyone who's tuning in to a podcast that talks about fintech will know who Nektarios is. Nektarios is practically one of the builders of fintech. You could call him a veteran, you could call him one of the founding fathers, but I think he prefers the term daddy these days. And you'll hear that once we start speaking. The magic of Nektarios is that whilst he is one of the brightest minds you will ever encounter, he is also a realist. He is also someone who will invest heart and who will invest action and genuine feeling into putting up those around him. This is what made him the most successful of fintech builders out there, if you wish. For a long while he was the figurehead behind the very first innovation labs ever in the world. I'm sure most of us have heard of InnoTribe. After InnoTribe, obviously, Nektarios has moved on and built the hundreds of successes that Rain-making machine, another enterprise that he was incredibly fundamental to, has offered in the grand scheme of putting innovation together with startups. So where Nektarios has genuinely made tracks, where his influence has been of a size that would fill up a Netflix documentary, is where he has recognized technological and human talent in the industry, and he has been able to put together corporate and startups in a way that would push their efforts to innovate light years ahead all through these past 20 years. Listen to his stories. You'll hear some of the amusement and you'll hear some of the scars, but you will certainly take away what is it that happens if a big consultancy is asked to not just bring their PowerPoint slides. Come back next week, loads more tea with other fintech veterans. Hello everyone, and welcome back to, we haven't yet decided, Tales from the FinTech Crypt. We have today the FinTech Daddy. I'm calling that Duena. The most important figure you can even bring to mind when it comes to the people that have been constructed digital and FinTech. Nektarios.
Well, first of all, that was rubbish because that's not true. I'm not one of the. But most of all, but thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Not true. It wasn't rubbish. It was absolute truth. I genuinely believe, and I wrote that in a book you probably haven't read, called Emotional Banking, that it had to be for your S-West and those of people like Rob Findlay and those of people like who were individually really building communities in their respective spaces. FinTech was not taken off. So I believe what I said. Absolutely fundamental. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, when should we tell people that your journey with FinTech really started? When have you first heard the term or became involved in it?
That's an easy one, but I think we can frame it slightly differently. So I started doing fintech when I left my corporate job at Swift and joined InnoTribe. So when you talk about who started what, I think InnoTribe was for me the pod, this slightly revolutionary, subversive thing that emerged that showed me a different way of working with people that you like and rate, with no hierarchical expectations and all these beautiful things that we all talk about. So we started doing fintech ecosystem work with the InnoTribe Startup Challenge, with all the content bits, before it was a word. And when we decided that we want to launch an accelerator as InnoTribe, the idea was that it was going to be called the InnoTribe Accelerator, because we saw all these amazing companies in the InnoTribe Startup Competition, which we were calling financial services startups in 2010, 2011, 2012. And we thought maybe a way of working more closely together as an industry would be to have this accelerator thing, which was new, that came from Silicon Valley. And then we couldn't do it within Swift because of the politics, so everybody left. And I joined Startup Bootcamp to launch the first innovation-focused accelerator program for financial services. And at that point, FinTech had started becoming a thing. And I sat down with this young man called Marcus, who became our first COO in December 2013, and was telling him about what we're building. And he looks at me and goes, "So FinTech, technology from Finland, right?" So I can place the moment where I realized that it's not a thing yet. So yeah, but this was the journey. InnoTribe, the InnoTribe Startup Competition is the first global fintech competition. We had, I don't know, Wise, when they were called TransferWise, as an early stage company in a Toronto showcase. So that was 2011. We had Revolut in 2014 when they had just raised a Series A, I think. So we've done some early days stuff. And this is probably why yeah, you kind of made that introduction. It was a small community of people. And I remember in 2015, was it 15? There was this magazine called the FinTech, I don't even remember what it was called, the Wall Street Journal spin-off type thing. I forgot what it was called, that did this feature about the 50 FinTech influencers, which was the first time I heard the word influencer. Go figure. Yeah, so this is all history. I did this for 5 years. I started bootcamp and rainmaking, my business that was corporate innovation for banks. We went really global, all the way from the Bay Area to Melbourne, Australia. So we had 12 programs around the world in all the cities where there was financial service activity. We did some insurtech work. And then I ran away from everything because I was just tired of having the same conversations with bankers at very senior level, where you look them in the eye and you know they were never going to do the difficult stuff. They were only going to do the things that look good on any report. So this was my journey. It was the most exhilarating and exciting 6-7 years of my life at that point, but it was also this very heavy disillusion and bitterness where you kind of go, look, mate, we all want to change the world, but some more than others. And that's why I had to run away from my own sanity and I'm doing fintech again, but no longer with
I heard. We'll get right back to that because we were going to visit on this S1E1 leave fintech if you want to keep your sanity, but we can't do that because to a degree you have returned, to a degree I have returned. This is at the end of the day tales from the FinTech Crypt, so we're just talking about fintech again. But I think what's really interesting, and for those of us that are listening to this and that had been part of that time, there were obviously, as Nektarios put it, there was such a swell of enthusiasm and we were all so say-eyed and so convinced that technology is going to change the world that consumers interact with their money, and we would have made this change. And to a degree, I think all of us sitting around the table here would have been part of that, right? But what it is, I think, lost in translation for the newer generations is the effort that has gone into us digitally transforming banks has been and has turned into an amount of burnout for the most of us that were under those pressures at first that hard to describe. I will leave it there. But and that it wasn't necessarily, I think, realistically, it's one because of the speed of innovation and technology, obviously. Secondly, because we were building something that had never existed before. The idea that money had to become digital. We were part of a really quite big moment, I would say. And then obviously with it, to do that, we had to also introduce the idea of agile, the idea of doing human-centered design, because you couldn't do this money digital thing without doing those things as well. So we had to learn everything and care about everything. But have we done it, all of us? It's a good question. And how far have we gotten, do you think?
Wow. So as you were talking, I kept remembering all the little slogans we used when we were trying to educate people about why the banks are so rubbish at doing innovation. And amazingly, a lot of these things still haven't changed. I think so. So when we did Startup Bootcamp, we built an accelerator with a specific focus on it being an innovation-driven accelerator rather than an adventure-driven accelerator. So bring in banks on the other side who were curious, and on the other side, startups who were looking for access, right?
And I interrupt you there. I know it's not nice, but I interrupt you because I can probe to that. I was a mentor for Startup Bootcamp, and the meaning there was to find things that did not exist internally in the organization. So absolutely.
And it was trying to understand where the organization is and trying to figure out how we can actually solve for a problem. But the problem was that the banks didn't really have a clear sense of their identity. They thought they were cool by putting in 100 million towards an innovation budget that nobody knew how to use. And the startups were naive by thinking that just by talking to the head of innovation, they will be able to get in. So the things we will talk about is, so I had all these beautiful slides. One of them was
It's the toothbrush.
PCL. No, PLC, yeah. PLC. The biggest obstacles for innovation is PLC. And people go, what do you mean by PLC? Public limited companies say, no, procurement, legal, and compliance. If you don't bring these people on board, nothing will ever happen, right? There's one. The other slide that we had was this arrow that said from ROI to R&D. And then you talk to banks and go, guys, you do realize you're an industry that doesn't have the concept of R&D. Any other industry that talks about innovation understands experimentation, failure, everything that comes with it. You don't build product because you experiment with it. You build product because you incrementally do something different that your competitors do. And you get all these blank faces because people didn't want to acknowledge that this was it. But reality is that the other thing in all of this is that people also started conflating things, right? There's this talking about innovation, digitization, the word
change,
all this.
data.
They're very, very different processes that should be owned by different people. Culture change, right? And then you kind of sit down with like, and the irony of this is we actually, I had a conversation with a building society in the north of England about a year ago. And they brought in their head of people because this person wanted to take all 5,000 people of the organization through this change process. And I had to go, guys, who are we kidding here? Nobody joins a bank because they like change. And you tell this to people and they go, wow. And you go, is this really happening? People come to a bank because they want predictability, they want stability. So if you want to take 5,000 people, the whole organization through a change process, nothing's going to happen. You need to find the ones who are actually capable of understanding and progress and proselytizing and all that, right? So all this big bucket of wool was a part of the big first innovation wave in 2013, 14, 15. And then it all died down. And then people realized we tried innovation, didn't work. Let's go back to BAU. And then all the budgets started drying out. And guess what? It's 2024, and I don't see that much change.
I think that's a very understated understatement, right? I don't see that much change. I think if someone put side by side their mobile apps from today and the day we guys FinTech the first time, I would be very surprised if 2 features were added. But let's leave that aside. And I'm sure a number of people would be upset to hear that, but realistically, nothing has fundamentally changed in the experience with one's money, and there are no more money moments and emotional moments than when I started crying about them.
So sorry, a lot of the changes we have are regulation driven, right? Let's start with that. It wasn't the banks that thought, oh, let's do this. It's going to help our clients. The other one is if you look at some of the banking apps, it's, oh, okay. So this is what Monzo did 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And now you're doing it a nicer version. Fair enough, right?
Yeah.
It's also, I mean, sorry, but sort of, it's all getting a bit soapboxy, but you push some buttons there. It's also okay to acknowledge that. I would always prefer talking to a bank. And when we talk about talking to a bank, we were amazingly privileged to start a bootcamp because we were some of the first ones, right? We would actually talk to C-level, like proper C-level.
Yeah, I know that feeling. We did learn very much on the beginning of that, yeah.
So the ones who said, look, we're never going to be leaders. We're going to sit it out and figure it out. That's fine. The ones that really bugged me were the ones who pretended that they wanted to be at the forefront and then just got everything wrong.
The innovation theater, right?
Yeah, it's a theater. It's the not being able to spend 100K on an experiment, but being able to put 150 million aside to create a fund to invest strategically. And then you realize that the people who are running the fund, who are not VCs, who people from M&A or strategy, didn't really understand the strategies or the problems that we're looking to solve for the individual business units. So all this was this unhealthy mess. But it was this also disconnect between ambition of some people in the organization and no awareness about the delivery capability. And this delivery capability was, for me, that's innovation. You build the capability to deliver faster, better, not having people go from conference to conference and talk knowledgeably about blockchain.
Or get a pretty green grass.
Yeah. For a while, we tried to get the hashtag beanbags and post-its to trend, but it didn't take off. But everybody had some beanbags and post-its in their
For
fancy.
the kids listening to this who don't understand how a hashtag trends, Nektarios and I lived from the beginning of Twitter, now called X. And what was happening is when we were having a conversation in the FinTech sphere, that was a conversation on a hashtag. So anytime we have like a big meeting over the years, such as I don't know, Free of Faith, an InnoTribe event, we could make those hashtags trend.
Yeah,
we did
people would talk about it. Yeah.
there was a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement. What I think I remember of those days of, you're right, we were very privileged. I said this all over again. Every time I teach stuff, I say, look, I was lucky. I got into the fintech industry at a time that it was non-existent, it was building. So we all built it together. We all were there to see the moves, to see what existed in terms of systems, to see what existed in terms of culture, to see what existed in terms of technology. And the access we had to understand both the technology in the belly of a bank and the human debt problem that was keeping them from fixing it, it's probably not going to be easily equaled again. Like, for instance, over my career afterwards, I've ran on almost like an open accelerator platform, which meant that I had to put all of these fintech already mature companies that had gotten this investment from Startup Bootcamp together. And I saw the same thing, which is that the disparate remained. It doesn't really matter. It didn't really matter how incredibly perfect the technology was or how much we were working to show that technology in the aspect of here's how you make money. Because at the end of the day, and why I left fintech is because it all boils down to how much human debt do you have. Will it matter that Nektarios tells you the tools? Or will you go, no, absolutely, I don't pretend you never felt him and keep your bonus. But equally, we know so many vendors that we've met over the years that are not these horrible people that are tending to just make a bonus. We actually don't know enough people who make these hundreds of millions of bonuses. I don't know if you've met them. Have you?
So I'm going to answer the question slightly differently. What you're describing for me is ultimately the root of why things didn't work out the way we idealistically were hoping it to happen, which is that the root of all of it is ultimately not around it not being the right mechanisms or the right people or the right tools or whatever, right? It's shareholder expectations and the incentivization of senior people. This is really the reason we are where we are for me. It's if you look at the banks who were really, really bad at doing even the simplest things way back, the moment the quarterly returns were positive, nobody bats an eyelid because you could also tick that box in the annual report. It's like, hey, we've got a lab. Innovation is ticked. The thing about the people, particularly for me, is that we met a lot of good people along the way, solid people with all the right intentions, but it was usually a step in their career. Right. And then they moved on and then somebody else. And then you go, do I need to talk again to the new head of innovation at this bank? Maybe not. And because they all also didn't want to do the things that the predecessors did, they had to throw everything out of the window. And in our case, sometimes terminate contracts or not wanting to see a project through, where we were like, are you for real? Because this is actually going to ship product in 9 months. It's happened. This conversation happened, right? I think maybe, well, we've got a bit of time. For me, one of the best moments to explain the mindset that we faced as an innovation execution agency was quite early on in the days of blockchain. We were approached by 3 big banks, and it was like a global triangulation, like a Swiss bank, an American bank, and a European bank, and a EU bank. And it all came from the smart people in the room who wanted to find somebody to help them syndicate blockchain engagement model. So they said, look, we come together with the problem cases, you bring the startups, but you facilitate the process. And we built a really solid model. It was a tender. So we made it to the final 2. And then I get a call from our sponsor at one of the banks, like our friend who brought us in, saying, guys, you didn't win. You didn't make it. One of the big consultants has made it, and they made it because the company is more comfortable with the brand they recognize. But everybody in the room agreed that your proposition was better, right? And then he tells me that he sat down the guys who won and told them, guys, you didn't get this gig because you were the best. You got this gig because you're just already embedded in the organization. But what I don't want from you is PowerPoints. And the guy from the consultancy, which is a big name, looks at him and goes, oh, okay, we can also do slides. We can also do Prezi.
Oh,
That was a response.
oh my
We're
God.
going to give you a deck in a different format.
Incredible. It's not a PowerPoint. They have Prezis.
Yeah. So this is what we were up against in the early days. And the shocking thing is that these organizations, of course, need to justify their existence and figure out how they continue to be relevant with change. But they've found a more glorified way of continuing doing the same thing. So it's also an unhealthy ecosystem that everybody plays with everybody, because veering off from that is just too risky. And hell, it's people's money on the line. You go, aviation and pharma do a lot of R&D, right?
It has a doctor.
How do they do it? Because there's people's lives on the line. But there is this mindset that we're special, we're different, you don't get us. Why should we bother changing some things fundamentally where everything just works in the end?
This continuation as business as usual when it comes to financial services is absolutely, I've realized when I left the industry, or I don't know if I left the industry, but when I opened my eyes to there being pharma, to there being retail, to there being aviation, it became very clear to me very fast that there's massive differences, and the care towards your humans, the care towards your R&D, the care towards your ideas is completely absent in banking. It feels like a desert land where that doesn't exist as compared to other industries. With that said, it reminded me something of what you said of those early days of innovation when we were knocking these doors down and talking to these execs and saying, look, you have to be this dude that asks for a new SAP schedule. What was his name? Michael Hardy. You need to be one of these big people. You have to make the big moves. And let's face it, I used to call it, and we can say this on this podcast, I used to call it board scolding. Like, that's what you need to do as a startup or as an innovation partner. You need to go, no, you know the right thing, okay? You'll be fine. And if people kind of ended up being together in a situation that was creating the right digital environment, then that's the success stories. And I think something you said there is incredibly true. Every sale we've made from many guys, and I say this openly, has been not to a board or to a bank. It has been to one or two advocates and corporate heroes that were an entrepreneur at the right time, saw the light, wanted to make a genuine change in people's lives and execute it. And like you said, that is their career. They're elsewhere now. Most of them are unfortunately very burnt out if you really track them now. But what we did gather together is that you're right. It doesn't. I think that's what the disappointment is to a degree to me and to others. I heard is we thought if we just made the right things, the good right things that people would love, and we just sit down and create things together, that will undoubtedly be a good day, and it will be universally accepted as the thing to do. And what we are struggling with still is the things we have advocated for, the ease of information, organizations that are generally disinterested to silence, people who don't have all of these things. We've been saying this, like Nektarios says, for a solid 15 years at the minimum. And the changes are very incremental. So what areas have remained where there is big change to still be made?
So maybe a reflection on what you just said is my conclusion out of this was to run away and hide my head in the sand for a while, and then come back and try and do the things the banks will never do, but no longer trying to get the industry to change. It was very much like, look, if you're part of a community that doesn't get the financial services that you need because the banks were never built for you, let's build the bank for that. That's why we built Daylight, the first LGBT bank in the world. That's the startup I'm working on now, is also recognizing the banks were never built for the people who want the service. So in terms of areas, I think if you take a step back and just look at markets, let's start with a statement that we use at the beginning of my new startup, which is called Radish. We would open our pitch by saying that the existing financial services system is built by straight white men for straight white men. And that in itself gives you a whole market of people that are probably getting no deal from a bank or a lesser deal from a bank. Our business is a lending business. If you look at what lending products are available out there, they're all available for people who on the surface can afford them. So again, what happens with all the other people who are actually maybe creditworthy, but the banks don't see them, or who have specific reasons why they can't afford a loan, where with the right lens and right understanding of the vulnerabilities, you can actually lend to them and knowing that you will get a return. So there's a lot of, I wouldn't go into a vertical and say, hey, we need to fix lending, or we need to fix, I don't know, capital markets, corporate actions, whatever. I would go and saying that there's just still so many people who self-declare that the system doesn't give them what they actually need. Let's start there. And also, you mentioned earlier something about the technology and the excitement. I've always felt that what we're doing was technology-enabled business model innovation, right? So the key thing was still, hey, let's look whatever's the latest tool, because it's going to be transient, it's going to be ephemeral, but let's change something in the way we service the people and the model behind it, etc. And we're getting a little bit there. I think some of these things started happening. I think the fact that nowadays people, because it all started with payments, right? Payments innovation now is a little bit of it's a commodity. Nobody thinks about it anymore, right? Which is beautiful. Let's now start looking at the media things. And I grew up in the capital markets world. So for me, in my financial services journey, when I was wearing a suit and a tie, was very much with corporate actions, security settlement reconciliation, margin calls, proxy voting. It was all super fascinating, but also very much driven by this cartel mindset that we know what we're doing, don't get involved. And even if it's not efficient, we've got an agreement amongst ourselves. And technology can change a lot of that, but it hasn't really started doing that. So stock exchanges, the depositories, and everybody else in that space still have a lot of scope to change things. But then, yeah, if I just look at the tiny little pocket of what we're doing in lending, taking the vulnerability of the individual and the purpose of the loan into consideration makes for a very different story when you're looking at underwriting someone.
You're something like creating money moments, which was this concept I was doing with back in my FinTech day, which are essentially meeting people when they genuinely have a need that comes accompanied with a sentiment, that comes accompanied with an emotion, that comes accompanied with trust, and ideally enough relationship building that you can meet them there. So yes, it's still there. Which is shocking to me that we still haven't really solved all those. But with that said, like you say, a lot has moved. If we look at the world today versus the world a few years ago, while it's closing and it's slow and it's horrible in some ways, in terms of technology, we've done our job to a degree. I was saying this for another podcast. If you stop to think about it, we've all worked to create this digital thing. There's going to be another 5-10 years of tying up loose ends. And then all we're going to be left with is how much humanity can we do? Because all the other automated bits are made by machines now. So I think we are coming into a time where all of the organizations we've talked to will have to wake up. We'll have to say, this is it. Now I have to do what all the others have done and look at my people and look at the relationship with the humans that I'm giving money to and genuinely make changes. And a story you told earlier reminded me of something from years and years ago. I'll tell it to you really quickly. We made the first product in my startup first that was called, I don't even, Dating Teams. What it did was essentially allowing you and allowing your people to to use AI to end their self-representation, to end up being part of a perfect team, doing the perfect job together, right? So in essence, software allows you to kind of combine people perfectly in your organization. We brought this to CEO of a bank, and he was absolutely in love. She was shocked. She was like, this is how we should have all worked. We should all go home, only come back and do things that we are all, Jesus Christ, why haven't... and a day later, he called and he said, the board said there would be tanks on the ground if I even present this. to anyone else because it is insane to think that we could change our organization. So that's where that was life. And I strongly believe that will have never worked. We are so inconsequent in blinded by some idea of what process is and incapable of really moving away from it. That's fear that comes from the lack of psychological safety of talking about what the issue is. Then we might not get into big changes. Or maybe big changes are not needed. Maybe we were there, and banking doesn't need to be the innovative bit.
First of all, it doesn't. It's the sense of self-importance that the industry has. But I think also we're talking here now about something that happened over the last, let's be generous, 14, 15 years. And if you look at where we've got in that period compared to how things evolved before that, it's still quite astonishing. I think it's an industry that actually is very slow moving, but has this attitude that things have to happen fast. That was the beginning. It's like, when the digital banks started coming up, if you're going, yeah, but we're on one, so they've already been 3 years in and they still haven't had the millions of clients. And you go, 3 years takes you to get a project approval in the bank. So shut up and wait, right? And now we're seeing Revolut and Monzo and Starling and all the other nice banks doing good work and figuring out their respective profiles and creating choice for the consumer, which I think is amazing. Anyway, this can go on for hours.
And
So-
we have day jobs before, so you'll be
Yes, we
pleased to
do.
hear it won't. So why don't we leave it at this, Nektarios? A lot changed. We were part of those first days. There will be more days of growing. I believe, and I don't know if you agree or not, that there's a lot of hope that people can take out of where we go to, but there's also a lot of work that needs to be done, and probably needs to be done by the next generation. We need to be out faster.
Look, my take on this is I've spent 14 years in this world, maybe a little bit less. I've learned a lot. I think we did something, and a lot of it was around community and grassroots. I don't care much about the corporate side of this industry. That's why I'm doing my own thing. But I think that's also maybe the way forward. So more and more people will actually create meaningful startups, not to work with the industry, but actually complementary or supplementary to what the industry is just not interested in figuring out. They will continue having their role as an agents of trust, and but everything else is no longer, in the long term, the banks will just be this safe where you store things. But beyond that, not much around services and products. That's for us.
Love that as an outro, and I love that as a hopeful message for everyone else. No more banks, we don't need them, other than the bit that Nektarios has quoted there. And thank you so much for everyone tuning in. We do have some bits of pieces that are juicier, but we're going to keep those for the next episode if we can think of them. Thank you so much for coming over, Nektarios, and telling us about your journey and what it's been like. I know people are learning from this, and hopefully we can keep them informed. Thanks, and talk to you soon.
Take care.